Eve is the hardest planet to land on and return from in Kerbal Space Program. So today I'm going to attempt just that. This will be the hardest mission on my channel so far, and we have a giant 77 meter high rocket standing by to launch. Its first stage has a mind-boggling 45 Mastodon engines, each booster having 9. The second stage is powered by 4 Rhino engines, carrying the nuclear deep space stage, which has up to 30 nuclear engines in an asparagus staging system. Then we have the Eve sea level lander, carrying 1 Kerbal, powered by 8 vectors and 1 mainsail, also in asparagus staging. And finally we have the return stage, powered by a single Cheetah engine, which can carry 2 Kerbals, giving us a total delta V count of 14,753 meters per second. So, we are now on the launch pad during a Kerbin to Eve transfer window, and it is time to launch. And we have liftoff of our giant Eve rocket, those 45 Mastodon engines producing a massive 58,000 kilonewtons of thrust. Around 1 minute and 10 seconds into the flight, the 4 side boosters will separate from the core stage and fall back down to Kerbin. After fairing separation, we cut off the engines for the first stage and prepare for orbital insertion, which we are starting up right now. The first stage engines firing for one last time while getting ready for stage separation. And there we have that separation of the first stage, those 4 Rhino engines on the second stage doing one last push for a nice and circular orbit. And as you just saw, we have engine cutoff, and Jebediah and Valentina are in Kerbin orbit. But they don't have a whole lot of time to relax, because in about 1 orbit time we will do our Eve transfer burn, which we will still do with our second stage. The second stage will be used for Eve transfer, mid-course corrections and even Eve orbital insertion. So let's start with the first of those. So there we go, our 4 Rhino engines lighting up for a 50-second burn, taking up about 910 meters per second of delta V, our transfer window making it nice and efficient. And so, after nearly a minute of burning, we have engine cutoff, and we are now floating away from Kerbin. These are always some of my favorite shots, and I think you can understand why. Now while at solar apoapsis, we do a slight correction burn to get our inclination and Eve periapsis right, and after nearly 180 days of waiting, we finally arrived at Eve. Doesn't that just look absolutely awesome? Well, either way, we are currently approaching Eve periapsis, where we will light the stage 2 engines for one final time to start our capture burn. I've split our Eve circularization into 4 separate burns, each around 2 minutes long to take advantage of the O-berth effect, and for these burns the asparagus staging system will come in very nice indeed. As we are now doing our final burn, and after a few hours of burn psychose, we are now in a stable Eve orbit. So soon, we can get ready for landing, as Jebediah Kerman goes on EVA to board the lander, leaving Valentina all alone in her pod. And when the return stage separates and everything is ready, we fire our engines and we pray. and that is touchdown on Eve. Congratulations Jebediah, congratulations to the Kerbal Space Center, and congratulations to you for sticking around so far. This was my first time ever landing on Eve, so I am very happy that it all worked out. Jebediah will now climb out of the command pod and climb all the way down this 15-meter high descent and ascent vehicle. And now, Jebediah lets go, and he becomes our first Kerbal ever to set foot on Eve. Now, although Eve is a very toxic and dangerous planet, it still looks very nice due to the mod Parallax, which adds all these plants and giant bubbles floating in the air, however that works. And after Jeb walks past said things, he will plant the flag, which marks the return of the Zenith Aerospace Agency, as this is my first proper gameplay video in the stock KSP system since August last year. So now that the flag is down and we have admired the view, Jebediah will climb back into his command pod and wait for the right time to rendezvous with the return stage. And as the return stage is now above us, we light our engines and lift off from the surface and say goodbye to Eve. Now with this asparagus staging system, we will have to drop off 2 of our boosters every few seconds, with the intervals increasing each time. So now the final booster has been jettisoned, and after a little while Eve's thick atmosphere is completely engulfing our rocket in plasma, and we have to be very careful not to do our gravity turn too fast, as we could end up completely disintegrating the rocket and stranding Jebediah on Eve. And so after a few minutes we have dropped off the first stage, our 4 Terrier engines carrying us the rest of the way up to orbit. And a little bit later we have engine cutoff and we are now coasting towards our return stage. And a few dozen minutes later, there we are. So we are now very close to the return stage, pretty much on final approach. As there we go. We are docked to the return stage. So Jebediah will now transfer to the return capsule, before waiting a very long time for a return window. But when that time has come, they fire their engines for one last time. The entire command pod is shaking, Jeb and Valentina are shaking in anticipation themselves, and after 1300 meters per second of added velocity and a 1 minute and 15 second long burn, the engines cut off and Jeb and Valentina are headed home. And 200 days later, when they look outside their window, they will see a very familiar planet looking back at them. And a couple of hours later, they enter Kerbin's atmosphere. Welcome back Jebediah and Valentina Kerbin. That was a really exciting mission, and that does mark the end of this video. So, I really hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe and whatever you have to do, and I hope to see you in the next one.
Bye.